You're listening to Neurodiversity at Work.
Told me that when people rise up against you, what's the sign of your destiny real? Fake ones been hating cause they know that one day you're making it. Jealousy's all they can feel. Plugging the phone, drifting my zone. Pain in the future when thinking alone. About when I'm grown, already blown. How'd I get blessed with a beautiful home? You were the sight, beautiful life. Beautiful sex with my husband and wife. Beautiful children, people who want to come kill me because I'm expressing my rights. Kill me because I'm expressing my rights. Kill me because I'm expressing my rights.
Today's episode is sponsored by UDA. UDA is a HR tech consulting, advisory and services business. Their mission is to improve the HR tech industry for everyone. They work with vendors to help them build products that solve real-world problems, and they work with buyers to help them make better purchasing decisions. They are also advocates of neurodiversity at work. In today's episode, I meet Stan Wasowicz. Stan talks to us about his ADHD, growing up, being an incredible sales leader, and actually just loving life. He also talks about some of his sporting analogies and why he thinks neurodiversity is so important and why we should focus on skills and strengths. Hope you enjoy this episode. Hey Stan, really pleased to have you on the podcast. Been really interested to get you on for a while. Welcome. Would you like to tell the audience who you are, what you do, what you're about?
Hi, thanks Theo. Pleasure to be here. I admire your work that you do in the neurodiversity space, and we'll go back for a while now. So it's an absolute honor to also contribute. And so I work in the recruitment industry. Fell into it 14 years ago. Currently running alliances for Smart Recruiters. That's a San Francisco headquartered but globally operating talent acquisition suite on a mission to fix recruitment. Candidates can't really connect with employers. Employers say they think it's hard to find talent. So something's wrong there. We're trying to correct that and connect people to jobs at scale. On the side, I also advise a few really interesting companies. And in my free time, I like to do. I like to travel, I like food, spend time with the missus, and just a good life.
So Stan, we met it's almost 2 years ago because we have a troop coming up in Manchester. I remember seeing you across the room, and you were you stood tall, you were a confident guy, quite verbose, opinionated, had a good level of intellect. And I remember thinking, who is this guy? We had a great day that day, and we had lots more conversations. And I remember searching you out on LinkedIn. And then ever since then, of course, we've been well connected, partly because I've always seen you as somebody who has taken the lead on giving information, giving advice, giving support. And where you don't know about something, you've gone and found it out. And your level of energy has been through the roof. So I've always appreciated having you in my friendship circle and circle of experts, of those people who are willing to share their life experiences and work experiences. But the interesting thing is over that time, as I started to learn about neurodiversity, I started to wonder about you. And I started to think, this Stan, he's got a lot of energy. He's something about this Stan that I think is really different to other people. And I really like that. And I remember one day we were sat and we were having a drink and we were talking about this subject, and you opened up and told me about your life experiences. So leading on to that, Stan, tell me what neurodiversity means to you and how it impacts you.
Yeah, great question. In all honesty, it didn't mean much to me, or I wasn't aware of it until you've opened my eyes. So thanks for the introduction. And by the way, you're far too kind, man, Theo. Right back at you. Your energy, your passion, and especially for this particular subject, I think means a lot to a lot of people, opens a lot of eyes and puts people on a learning journey. When I first heard you speaking about neurodiversity, I thought, hey man, I think I tick a lot of Theo's boxes. I am on the lucky or on the positive side of the spectrum. I managed to use my abilities to conquer my challenges and my weaknesses that I may have cognitively. There are a lot of people that are less fortunate, and I think shedding a light on that and creating, especially in the workforce and in the employment space, a fertile ground for neurodiverse people to flourish is really important. Looking back, based on what I've learned from you, to answer your question, growing up and still, I found it very hard to focus on one thing only. I wouldn't even say it was boring. People thought that I might be too smart, and I got bored, or they thought that I might not just care, that I wasn't seeing the importance of specific subjects or activities. But that's not it. That was never it. Same goes for my energy. People thought that maybe I was just in need for attention, or all the sort of stigmas that get thrown at you. Even before that, they thought that I might have trouble focusing on the subject or reading or writing. That was never it. I always had good grades. I could always process information extremely fast, and I just really liked to get people going, create and explore new things and as many at the same time as possible. And at certain points that meant that it was hard for me to fall into the rhythm of the regular educational system, for example. And it also meant that I had to adjust and find ways to find a place and find a role to fit into the professional life.
So thinking back then, Stan, what do you think was the big defining moment, the shift for you, where you were able to think, right, I now know what I'm going to do? Because you talk about falling into recruitment, and there's a lot of conversations around where that happens. But where was the moment where you went, oh, actually, I feel this power, this energy that I can actually utilize in my working life and to be really successful? Where was that shifting point?
So I was pretty much going with the flow for a long time in my life, to be fair. When it comes to education, I dropped out of school a bunch of times, went back, then graduated high school, then dropped out of uni originally, got into selling door to door because I got introduced into it by mutual friends. And my parents were quite clear. Hey, if you're not gonna study, you're gonna work. You're gonna make your own contribution, right? That was the first time in sales, that I could really channel my energy and focus. And funnily enough, going door to door, it's quick, short-term impressions that you have to make, right? And you need to climax quickly, bring them to these opportunities that you open at the door to a close. You need to gain trust really quickly. You need to create a presentation really quickly. And that was the first time that I really, really think that professionally I channeled my energy and my ability to connect the dots, to quickly come up with the right type of things to say in a certain area, assess the neighborhood, find out how people work, see if I can leverage referrals. Looking back, that's the first time I really turned my energy into cash. Before that, when I was 11, I started playing basketball. I'll never forget this. The late, great Kobe Bryant. I can't believe that he passed away in that terrible, terrible crash with his daughter and all the other people in the helicopter as well. I'm not sure if you've seen the news, but that was one of my idols. I bought NBA Courtside in, I think, 1998, which was a game featuring him, and that got me involved in basketball. And sports, especially basketball, was for me another way to really channel that energy and get the most out of it. That went really well at that point. I got into to the highest level in Holland. I played in some national selection talent teams. So I think it definitely helped there. And earlier in life, I just did so many different things. I did so many sports. I read so many different. I was reading encyclopedias and that sort of stuff before I was even going to school. I remember wanting to know everything about every subject that I found I was passionate about, whether it was dinosaurs or the universe or physics or music, no matter what it was, right? So my whole life, I can reflect and find out that I can get really, really passionate about stuff. But then it's also quite hard for me to stick with one thing, to really concentrate, unless I fully immerse myself into it, which is also risky because you might really start identifying with that specific thing that you're doing and let go of who you are. So, man, it's a good question. I really don't know when an exact shift happened. I know that what I remember are the negative parts of it, because let's address those as well, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. So, like already said earlier, when you when you're the odd one out, when you're not exactly the same pace that everyone else is around you, people are quite quickly to judge it or to stigmatize. And what happened with me a lot is, rather than saying, oh, hey, since you're working really fast, you finished your exam 30 minutes earlier, your exercise 30 minutes earlier, oh, you actually did a good job, let's see what else you can do. At school, I just remember just being bored at a desk and starting to kind of distract other people, that sort of stuff. At home, I kind of had my falling out with my parents because I was just hard to I guess to cope with all the energy for them as well. So they just started looking for a diagnosis, if you know what I mean. They couldn't really find out what it is. They couldn't pinpoint it. And these were the days that drugging children was the trend. It's happening less right now. I think it's still happening a lot in the States. But myself, when I was at a young age, I think also 11 or something, I was introduced to Ritalin. Because I was diagnosed. The problem with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, it's just a cluster name, right, for different type of symptoms or different type of behaviors. But it's not a specific disorder or anything you can pinpoint. It's not a virus, It's probably genetic, but what is it? People just aggregate symptoms and call it something, and then they try to cure it. And for me, Ritalin meant that I, on one hand, could concentrate a lot better, which was good for sports probably, but I also created many neurotic behaviors, folding up my clothes extremely neatly, having needing my room to be fully aligned with the what do you call it, with the walls, with lines needed to correlate. It was ridiculous. So I had Ritalin until I was like 14. I was still at the highest level of the Dutch education system at that point. But at a certain point, I was just losing myself. And when I got off the drugs, when I was 15, because a social worker that I was seeing came in and said, like, hey, man, I was at a really high dose. I don't remember exactly, but I think I was taking like 4.5 pills on a daily basis, 1.5 in the morning, afternoon, evening. I wasn't sleeping. I was sleeping for maybe 4 or 5 hours a night. And when I stopped, I definitely had some kind of reaction to it, because at that point I just went full circle the other way. School didn't matter to me anymore. I really didn't only want to focus on sports, and I wasn't the most pleasant person to be with. It was puberty as well. So in retrospect, I'm thinking if there was a system where people like me that just are high energy, that like more information, like to do more different things, and a school system that would cater to that, that would support creativity, that would support children learning at their own pace, whether it's slower on one side, faster on another. I think that would really, really help. And in the business world, that's why I'm a fan in the business world of Ken Blanchard and situational leadership, because that's focused. That's pretty much task-based management. So if you excel at something, we'll give you more responsibility and more autonomy. If you're new to something and you have less transferable skills, less talent, you're more nervous about it, great. We'll give you more of a direct leadership style, tell you what to do. I think neurodiverse people that have traits that fall into that easily distracted spectrum, or even in the autistic spectrum, would really benefit from a more tailored approach from the educational system, as well as the professional work-life system. There's a lot of untapped potential there.
That's really fascinating, Stan, and I think you framed that really well. There's a couple of things I want to pull out there. So the one is the way that you think and respond fairly quickly, and sports kind of works well to that end. There's been some great research and articles recently around people with ADHD, their brain almost wanting immediate gratification. So no matter what you try to make your brain do, if your brain sees it as boring or just, it doesn't have an end point to it, your brain rejects it. So irrelevant of what we want it to do, irrelevant of what a manager tells us to do, what a teacher tells us to do, what your mum or your dad tells you to do, if your brain doesn't see the immediate benefit of doing it, then it refuses it, it rejects it. The other side to that is because our brains work in a way where we seek immediate gratification, and that's where things like sport, where, you can go and try and score a goal and you get that immediate gratification, or you run or you play a game that's 90 minutes or whatever it may be. It's there, it's happening, it's in the moment. The same with music, you get that immediate gratification. With the arts, with painting, there's a lot of good reason why people who are neurodiverse, who have ADHD, go into these environments, and also why they become highly entrepreneurial, because they're always seeking that immediate gratification, right? They're always looking at that means they're willing to go through a lot of change, a lot of transformation. But what we've got to do is facilitate and support those individuals to be able to focus on those tasks where they can see immediate benefit, or break longer, more complex tasks up into segments. So I sometimes say, give me a false deadline. Give me a false deadline, but give me a reason why you've put it in place. You almost have to lie to me and say, we've got this deadline, it's tomorrow, the world's gonna end if you don't do it. And I'll be like, yeah, I'll do it.
That really resonates with me, because when it comes to long-term goals, I always have to break those up in segments, or I procrastinate, or it just doesn't happen. So I've trained myself to creating these micro goals that work towards the larger goal. But I think that over my career, what I found out, and what I struggled with at first, and now struggle a bit less with, but still I'm very, very much on a learning curve on how to channel the energy and get the most out of my ideas, is that I connect dots on a different level, an abstract level, in a faster pace usually than most of my peers, and that's great for business development. It's not that great for project management. It's not that great for stakeholder management, getting people on board. Because, for example, if you show me in my first job, I worked in an international recruitment department of an organization with 125 branches when we started. That grew after that. They were being very reactive. A few large Dutch customers, when I was still in Holland, couldn't get the talent they needed to fulfill their goals, mainly in technical type of labor or hard labor, shifts, logistics, the type of stuff, Dutch people either couldn't do or didn't want to do, how I framed it. That's what we recruited people from outside of Europe, Holland, mainly Eastern Europe from. But it was purely reactive. And I thought, hey, there's an opportunity there to make money. And it took the department, I think, approximately 10 years to get to 10 million. But because I saw all these branches, I saw that network in Eastern Europe. I saw that we had connections with various partners that could supply housing, transportation, insurance, financial support for international workers. This sounds quite complex, but in my mind, instantly I saw, hey, there's a very clear business opportunity there just to connect all of these. So instead of going out, grabbing the phone myself and cold calling hundreds of businesses to see if there is a need at all, what I started doing is training our internal teams into identifying international recruitment opportunities within their specific areas, essentially creating my own SDR function, my own outbound sales function, and setting me and in the future my colleagues up to bring in international recruitment based deals, for that value proposition. And in 4.5 years, we more than doubled what it took 10 years to take, just by taking that approach. That was the first time actually that I had to put it on paper, my idea. My manager forced me to. They even sent me to uni, paid for it, in order for me to also learn how to structure these thoughts, because they love the idea, but it's all right, Stan, but I think we get it, but we're not fully following you. And for a while, And I still see that sometimes I go so fast because I just see a few ingredients and my mind just puts them together, and I see some kind of value chain happening there. And you don't want to know how often I hear, "Oh, Stan, that seems quite complex," or "It sounds quite complex." And at first I used to get defensive, like, how can you say that's complex? It's not complex at all. Look, it's right here. Now I'm starting to understand. Oh no, wait, I just operate a bit differently. My brain just, maybe that's exactly what you're saying. My brain loves to make those connections, because anytime that happens in my mind, I feel like I'm completing a piece of the puzzle. And actually, I also as a kid loved making puzzles, because that probably also has a lot of instant gratification, right? Just putting the right pieces in to work towards a bigger picture. So yeah, that's some interesting insights you maybe have there.
Yeah, and it's about mental health and well-being. If we're lucky enough to get in the right position and maximize our strengths, then that's great. But often we find that immediate gratification in other ways. So it might be through alcohol, through drugs. It might be through obsessive compulsive, as you mentioned, the way that you fold up clothes. There's all different types of ways that the brain will seek that immediate gratification. So that's why I find it fascinating. A drug may help alleviate some things that are going on in your head, but actually, if we look back in the history of evolution, those things that drug is trying to alleviate are the things that actually make you superhuman, are the things that can make you do things that other people can't do. So that's interesting, but it's conforming to the constructs of society and our built environments and our working environments. We're being forced into this box, and I think when we're not forced into a box, what we get to see is incredible people like you doing superhuman things. But I think you're right. You still have to bring that back down to a place that other people can understand, because a lot of stuff goes on in my brain where you assume that there'll be some level of understanding. But the problem is you've just had maybe 100 thoughts going in your head, and what you say is maybe those 100 thoughts packed into a single thought. And nobody else has had the benefit of hearing those 100 thoughts. And then to see the puzzle put together as you've done it, all they're seeing, these 4 different pieces of puzzle put together that in their mind don't quite match, and they can't see the rest of the bigger picture, which you've already got through in your mind. So I do find that fascinating. Stan, last couple of points. What would you say to either your younger self or maybe other people who may be having the same feelings that you had, the same energy levels, unsure, how to make the best of those energy levels? What would be your advice to them?
There's a few things. One, I think it's really understanding yourself. So understanding where the energy is coming from, where the emotion is coming from. There's various ways of doing that. Some are meditation. The other ones are just also having some time for yourself to think about why am I thinking this? Where is this coming from? The second one is, don't feel ashamed for having high energy. Well, when people address it, understand that it's not necessarily an attack. It might just be because there's a lot of energy, but find a way how to turn that into a positive. And when you do, you'll see that people will, actually feed off your energy and of your ideas. Professionally, I think it's surround yourself by people that will form either formal or informal teams, connections that they complement you and vice versa. Funnily enough, most of my friends are quite laid back. So it balances out. Coincidentally, also a few of them are in UX, and I'm not surprised because people that go into UX, UI, especially the project managers, the product owners, these are the people that discover the ideas, absorb the ideas, and then come back to the organization in a way that it's understandable. So somehow I always feed off them really well, also privately. But then finally, have you ever heard of Pat Riley?
Yeah,
from one of the most winning coaches in the history of the NBA, the National Basketball Association in America. Wrote an amazing book called The Winner Within. He came out with what at that time was a strange concept. but has proven its value time and time again. What he said is to develop your strengths, not your weaknesses. So paradoxically, when you have high energy, when you seem disorganized or chaotic, when you seem distracted, what most people try to do in the educational system, but also in professional environments, is tone it down, is manage it, structure it, is kind of put a leash on it, if you will. While I believe that fueling it and letting it go and channeling it into the right direction is way more effective. And where Pat Riley proved this is that he had some terrible free throw shooters in his teams. Later on, I don't think that was under Pat, that was under Phil, but yeah, Shaquille O'Neal, a massive center in the NBA, terrible free throw shooter. I think below 50%, while the average league average is above 80. So there were even strategies to just foul him on purpose in order to make him go to the free throw line. So you would think, hey man, if I just train Shaquille O'Neal on shooting free throws all the time and I'm able to bring that percentage up, I'm winning games, because he was unstoppable under the basket. He was so heavy, so big, he could just dunk every ball. But his coach at a certain point said, you know what, Shaq, screw it, never mind. Forget free throws. Just throw them at the rim, see if you make one is great. If you don't, no one really cares. What we are going to do, we're going to give you the ball in the position where you can score it almost 100% of the time. And during practice, we're going to practice getting you the ball in that spot, and you're going to practice becoming even more lethal in that position. And man, that was also a major driver for me to be like, all right, great. So rather than trying to put a leash on my talents or where I can deliver the most value, why don't I try working as hard as I can on channeling it and on developing it and maturing in it and creating, process and methods to leverage the best I can, and care a little bit less about, composing and toming and pacing. And it's a balance for sure, but I think that's why I would give way to whether you're, whatever your neurodiversity trait is, whether it's trouble having reading, but you're super creative and you can work around that. Well, let's look at that rather than reading. Whether you have trouble speaking to people, looking people in the eye, instead of going and practicing that as much as you can, and go to network events and see if you can, step out of your comfort zone and kind of create that extrovertness that you don't have. Rather look at what you can do really well, whether that's writing or coding or mapping out processes or math, if that's your thing, and double down on that rather than becoming a social animal. And yeah, that's I think in a lot of words again, because that's also how I work, man. You turn on the on switch and I'll pretty much try to tell you what I'm thinking, and you're right, there's a million other thoughts going through my head, so it's impossible. But if I have to bring it down into one sentence, I would say develop your strengths rather than your weaknesses.
Stan, that is absolutely brilliant. And all they have to do is look at what you've achieved and just follow you and see there's things you come out with on social all the time. And in real life, you're a font of knowledge. And it is always a pleasure talking to you, Stan. I could talk to you all day long. And sometimes we will, and we do. So really,
likewise, including some of those instant gratification beers.
Yeah.
Looking forward to Theo. I'll definitely keep following your podcast. Cheers, man.
Dan, you're the man. Great to have you on, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Cheers, bye.
You've been listening to Neurodiversity at Work, available on all good podcast hosts. Please do sign up now, like, share and comment. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you. Today's episode is sponsored by Udder. Udder is a HR tech consulting, advisory and services business. Their mission is to improve the HR tech industry for everyone. They work with vendors to help them build products that solve real-world problems, and they work with buyers to help them make better purchasing decisions. They are also advocates of neurodiversity at work.